Hey, I'm your token river rat this afternoon, and as Dave said, uh, we met at a boat show, and that started a friendship that I mean, it's been a rabbit hole. I had no idea when I first said hi to him what it would lead to, but he is very good at getting me to do a lot of things, including building the Portola out there. The one part of the story that he missed a little bit was I just had the Portola on the Rogue River, like literally less than a week ago. And part of the reason I wanted to do that was I knew I was coming here and bringing the Portola. I've always wanted to have that boat on the Rogue River, highly technical water. And so I figured if there's anything left after that trip, I'd bring it here so you could see, what kind of damage can be inflicted on a technical river. And there's some dings out there. So I'm proud of all the scars on all my boats because I have been known, I've got a reputation for running rivers with enthusiasm. So one of the things I learned when Dave and I hooked up was a fascinating history about the Grand Canyon and those boats. And I fell head over heels for the whole thing. I learned so much, and my passion is started out fly fishing in some crazy water in Oregon, and that really kind of flipped over to I would rather run rapids now. I'd rather run technical water than fly fish, which is saying a lot because I'm a pretty avid fly fisherman. Absolutely love it. Can't get enough of it. And what I want to do in this session is lay a little bit of the groundwork for the boats that you see out here. And I know you've covered a lot of this ground already, but it's one of the fascinating things for me is the features of the Oregon boats in technical water and how that applies to the Grand Canyon water is for me, that's fascinating as a boat builder, as a river runner. So I'm going to take us through that just a little bit. And again, keep in mind, this is what I would consider laying the foundation for what you see out here, particularly the boats in the 60s, the Susie 2 and the Portola. You're going to see a lot of similar features. So I'm going to take you to Oregon and kind of tell you a little bit. This is my baby. This is the boat that I just beat the tar out of in wild and scenic places. But when I talk about the McKinsey-style drift boats, what I like to tell people is to get through a rapid, there's basically 4 features that you want to keep your eye on, because without all 4 of those features, you just can't make it through the technical water. And so basically, it's the flare on the sides, because we're moving that boat laterally all the time to avoid rocks as we pick our way down through a river. It's the rocker, which I absolutely love. So when you see these boats sitting out here, you'll see, and if they're sitting in the water, you can see that's a good picture right there. Usually the front end is out a little bit and the back end is out a little bit, usually 6 inches, 8 inches. And that's a wonderful feature to the boats because they're not being pushed constantly with the river. That water is flowing under the transom, and so you can do some amazing things like spin on a dime and actually back row up into eddies because the water's not constantly pushing you down the river. Third feature is the bottom is flat, and you'll see on most all of these boats that they're flat bottom boats, and they are pigs to row on still water because you get blown around. The bow's a little bit high, and so they're not good boats for lakes, but they're sports cars when you've got a little power behind, and you can just move those boats back and forth, and it's a cool feeling. And the fourth feature is the high bow. And in Oregon we call that the prow, but because it's the whole sitting backwards, sitting forwards kind of thing. But so the prow is extended, and in the boats that you'll see out here, that's a great feature, particularly for the Grand Canyon. But in the technical waters that we're in, a lot of times we're jumping off of, say, a 4, 5, 6 foot drop, and you want to make sure that you don't keep going. And so the high bow kind of gets you a little bit of momentum to come up the other side. Very important. If it didn't have that, you just auger in basically to the next wave. So that's my when I don't guide anymore, but when I did, I had a lot of fun teaching people about the boats, and this was my best way of saying, watch how these features work, because we're going through a class 3, and so you'll see and feel the boat moving laterally, and we're going off of drops, and it's all 4 of those features that come into play at the same time. Does that make sense? So again, what's going to be applied is those features to the Grand Canyon boats, and that's where Dave and I really hooked up, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But I'm going to bring you into the world of wood boats. And the big question that I always get asked is, there are so many options for river running craft. There are catarafts, there's rafts, there are kayaks. Why in the world do you still row a wooden boat on these crazy rivers? That's the number one question I get asked. And so to help answer that, I'm going to show you a program that was done just a couple years ago on OPB. We had a public broadcast in Portland wanted to follow us along on one of our trips. Usually I'm the only wood boat guy in our group. I run with a bunch of river rats that are more fond of catarafts and big inflatables, and I'm usually the lone wood boat guy, but I talked 3 of my wood boat buddies into joining on this trip so OPB could do this special, and I hope you like this. It's about 10 minutes, but it'll kind of bring you into the world of Northwest river running, which again is the foundation for the boats that you see out there. The number one question I get is, why in the world do you row a wood boat in rock gardens that can smash your boat with any mistake?
They're like building a beautiful piece of furniture to kick down the stairs, and kicking it down the stairs is the point. That's why you build it.
When you see a wooden boat in this setting, it will literally turn your head and turn the clock back 50 to 75 years.
On this chilly October morning, Greg Hatten and Randy Dersham have returned to the Rogue River. They are setting off with their river buddies for a 4-day trip.
The thing that draws this group together is the passion for the river and river running.
Some 20,000 people float this section of the Rogue each year, but these guys do it a little differently. This is Greg, and the beautiful wooden boat that he's rowing is a hand-built replica of a boat that ran the Rogue back in the 1930s. And this is Randy and his dog Remy. He's in a boat so new that you can smell the final coat of varnish still drying.
This is the first time this boat's been down the river. First day that it's been wet.
You could say that their river running style is classic. And the river they've picked to run is not just any river. This is the wild and scenic Rogue River. It's a 34-mile stretch renowned for its raw beauty. In fact, it was one of the original 8 rivers in America to be protected under the Wild and Scenic Act. For river runners, it's considered one of the classic rivers. It cuts a deep gorge through the mountains of southern Oregon, and along the way offers dozens of rocky rapids to navigate. A challenge even for seasoned river runners like Greg and Randy.
We built the boat to come down here, and to me this is like the ultimate technical water to be running a wood boat through.
Greg and Randy aren't the kind of guys to brag about their backgrounds, but they are both McKenzie River guides. They have run every major river in the Northwest and taken their wooden boats down the Grand Canyon several times. This trip is an annual tradition for them. They run the Rogue every October, but even with their experience, taking wooden boats down the rocky Rogue will test their skill. Within an hour of launching, they reach the first major obstacle, Rainy Falls.
You can't run it. It's class 5, 6, and it would tear your boats up.
They can't run their boats over Rainy Falls, but to the side of it is a rocky channel called the Fish Ladder.
Okay, coming. I'm going to eddy out right through that drop. The fish ladder is the way to get wooden boats from one side down to the other side. We line the boats. Let her go, I got her. Watch the line.
Come down this way! Oh,
It's the narrowest part of their trip, literally a stair-step of rocks.
So we wrangle our boats down, and there's some danger in that. You've really got to be coordinated and quick on your feet. Whew. but that's the only way to get from the top down to the bottom and continue your river run. Not bad. Didn't look pretty, but... That lining of the boats around Rainy is kind of a rite of passage, if you will, for river runners. As you watch those little drift boats on the river, you can see there's so much more action, there's so much more activity, there's so much more responsive than just about any other type of craft. They'll give you a ride on the river unlike anything else that's out here. And you develop almost a relationship with a boat when it responds to your touch and it delivers you safely on the other side of a rapid because of the dynamics of the boat and the way it can move. That's pretty special. The first time I saw a wooden drift boat come around the corner on the McKenzie River, I fell in love. And then I started pursuing, how do I get one of those? And the conclusion was, you build one. And when you spend that much time laboring over every cut, every joint, every angle, caulking the seams, varnishing, sanding, you develop a pretty close relationship and an intimate knowledge of the boat that you're working on because you spend so much time paying attention to the little details.
Although it's simple, there is this beauty in the simplicity. Just really nice, swooping, clean lines that relate to each other are what the drift boat's all about. When it's made out of wood, you get this special connection to nature, and you get the connection to the trees.
I've run a lot of miles with Randy on the rivers, and he's a good oarsman, he's a good boat builder, he knows the history. We're kindred spirits in that way. He likes to run old school, and so do I, and so we're a pretty good pair.
What do you smell, Remy? Find a bear.
I love it when he brings the dog. It's nice to have a dog in camp because this time of year there's a lot of bears down here, and they sound the alarm if there's a bear around, and the bears are pretty leery when they know there's a dog around.
That's a pretty good sized bear.
You sleep better when you know there's a dog in camp with you.
At camp, you can see another aspect of Greg's passion for river running's past. He calls his style canvas and wool.
I kind of came up with the idea of, okay, if we're going to replicate the boats, let's replicate the camping. When you see a canvas tent set up in a place like this, it's just another one of those reminders of the history and the guys who came before us and the way they camped, the style they camped. It's nostalgic.
Folks have been taking wooden drift boats down Oregon rivers for more than a century. On the Rogue, one of the earliest was the popular Western writer Zane Grey. His novels first introduced the Rogue to a wide audience. His cabin still stands along the river's side.
So it's kind of cool to see where he actually hung out and did his work. I could see how you could be very inspired in a place like this.
As the team continues down the river, they pass pumpkins precariously perched on rocks.
I think it started out as a guide tradition to put a few pumpkins out in the fall.
This trip, we probably pulled about 40 pumpkins off the water. Yep.
Unusual.
Yeah.
This is unusually increasing amount of pumpkins.
And 10 years ago when we were doing this, we didn't see very many. I mean, so you'd see a pumpkin here and a pumpkin there, and it was kind of cute, kind of clever, because they'd be in hard to reach places and make you think, how did that get there?
And now there are so many people putting pumpkins in the river that it's certainly is a mark of mankind onto the river.
And pumpkins have become, in my opinion, graffiti down here.
I actually like the pumpkins.
Come on, Randy.
At camp, the mood is subdued. Tomorrow brings the two biggest hazards of the whole trip. The boaters bed down and hope to get some sleep. In the morning, Greg is quiet as he packs his boat. Ahead, the turbulent Mule Creek Canyon. Here, the river cuts through the solid basalt of the Cascade Mountains.
In Mule Creek Canyon, the water is rushing through there so quickly that you're literally improvising almost every move. You've got very little room to navigate. In most places, you're touching the wall of the canyon with the tips of your oars.
It decides what it wants to do. It is literally sitting there percolating.
Most folks do this in rubber rafts that can bounce off rocks. But wooden boats don't bounce, they break. Mule Creek Canyon releases the wooden drift boats. Randy's shiny new boat is now scratched and dinged. Luckily, it's not leaking. There's no time to relax. Around the bend is the most dangerous rapid of the entire trip.
Blossom Bar is a notorious rapid on the Rogue that has a long history of wrecking trips. There are a couple of moves in Blossom that if you don't get right, you get into big trouble very quickly. At the scout point, when you're looking at the moves that you have to make, I mean, it's more than butterflies. I wanted to puke. The very first move to pull left to right to avoid what we call picket fence. And if you miss that move, you're in big trouble. People have lost their river craft or lost their lives. And it just makes you appreciate the fact that you've got to get it right, because there are very real consequences if you don't.
It's good when it goes right.
It's good when it goes right.
It goes bad real fast.
With Blossom behind them, the river and the boaters' moods relax. The current and the oars slow, as if neither wants to let go of the mountains just yet. There are no more rapids to run, and ahead of them, their cars are waiting to take them back to cities and day jobs and such, so they savor the slow final stretch.
What a good day.
It's a chance to fish, and perhaps more importantly, to appreciate this experience where river running's present and past overlap seamlessly, synchronized by the river's pull.
I wanted you to see that because in like 10 minutes, that really gives you a full immersion into Northwest river running. And the fact that we're doing it in wood, is like for me, it's like bonus. But I didn't answer his question very well because he asked me point blank, why do you run it in wood? And so I believe it or not, I obsess about a question like that because I don't feel like I've ever answered it well. So I'm going to try to answer it better for you. Because here's why we hear that you shouldn't run in wood, why most people don't run in wood. A lot of upkeep to a wood boat, okay? They're fragile. They break. If you hit things like Randy did, you have to repair it. Easier to flip, easier to sink, because if you get a little bit high-sided up against the canyon wall and that side dips in an open hole drift boat, you're going to lose that boat in about 2 seconds because that water comes pouring in and you can't stop it. Storage is a hassle with a wood boat. You got to be careful. And there's an intensity that I actually love. And I bring this up because I have a friend who stopped rowing a drift boat, aluminum drift boat, because it was too intense of an experience. In other words, rafts, there's a big margin for error in rafts. You can bounce off of those canyon walls. You can go over rocks and don't even know that you went over a rock in a raft. In a drift boat, wood or aluminum, there's immediate feedback. And so the intensity that comes with running something that I would consider a little more fragile is very real. You have to be on point and watching every single, even if if a ripple looks like there might be a rock under it, you make a move and miss it, because on the chance that there's 2 inches below the surface, that will cause shop time. That'll make a lot of noise and that'll put a hole in your boat. And I happen to like that. I mean, I like the intensity. I like sitting on the edge of my chair. I feel very connected with the river when I know there's a lot at stake. And for me, that's part of it. So anyway, I've gone on a tangent, but so here's my counter to those things, okay? Here is why I run wood. Wood boats, again, my opinion is they're more responsive. And it could be because I know my boats so well because I build them. So you know how they move, you know exactly how much clearance there is. The Rogue Blossom Bar is a great example of that. I'm very confident and more confident in Blossom Bar than I am in Mule Creek Canyon because I know the clearance from the back of my seat to the tail of my boat, and you have to be very precise making that first move, because if you're a little too anxious, a little too early and clip that first big rock on the move, that's going to put you in a spin. And anyway, that's my justification that that is probably unnecessary. But aesthetics, I don't think there's anything that looks prettier on water in the Grand Canyon or in the Northwest than a wood boat in that setting. And just the natural nature of the wood and the surroundings, it's just a good fit. It's a warmer feel. If you've rowed an aluminum boat, there's just a warmth to a wood boat that you just can't beat. And I love the intensity. I like that there's something at stake there, and I know it's my time in the shop, but it's also a possibility of sinking a boat or doing something stupid. But I kind of like, I really like that. It keeps me on point, and it keeps me very, very aware of everything that's going on. But the most important thing in my headline is, as I'm sorting through all of this in my head, it's the connection. And there's a lot of connections that happen with a wood boat. It connects me with past river runners. And I kind of touched on that a little bit in the OPB thing because it helps me connect with people like Zane Grey. The whole wood boat thing is very historic, and it's a part of the heritage of river running in the Northwest and the Grand Canyon. We all started out in wood. There just weren't that many options back then. But I like that connection to the past. And for me, that's part of the fun. Connects me with a whole bunch of boat builders that I didn't even know existed. When I decided I was going to build a boat, I wasn't sure I could do that because it's a dying art. And I was assured by a couple of guys that still build boats on the McKenzie River in Oregon that I could do that. And if I got stuck, that I'd go to their shop. And so I had a lot of help in building my first boat because I would go to their shop when I got stuck. We didn't have chat rooms or websites where you could, just kind of send a picture and get some feedback. And so it's a community build. I had a lot of help building that first boat, and it is an art that's quickly disappearing. So the connection between other boat builders who have gone through the same things, made the same measurements, made the same mistakes, redone the things that I didn't like. I've built 3 boats when I actually finished one because I redo so many things that I don't like. And I love the history. I love the whole history of not only the Grand Canyon, but McKenzie River and other wild and scenic rivers. I feel like the wood boat just connects me with the history. And I'm pretty connected to the rivers that I run. And I think the wood boat thing has a lot to do with that. It's the intensity of making sure that I'm paying attention to everything, but it's also the wood on the water. For me, I feel like I'm better connected to the experience than I would be if I was rowing a raft. And again, I'm very biased on that, but I just think it's for me, it's a good fit. And it's not a good fit for everybody. And I'm happy being surrounded by rafters because that's the river rats that I hang out with, and they are nice enough to include me, a wood boat guy, in their group. But we get along great. But for me, I just the wood boat is the thing. So anyway, that maybe is a better explanation of why I row wood, because I wouldn't row anything else. In the process of this journey, and Dave pitched to me the idea of the Portola, I had no idea what I was going to get into, and I don't think he even finished the sentence before I said yes. I mean, I was like, yeah, this sounds like something I got to do. What I learned in doing the research around the connection between the Oregon boats and the Portola and the Susie II absolutely made my head spin around. And so I don't, Brad, you may have covered this story about the Oregon boats and the little bit. What is so interesting and why Dave tapped me on the shoulder for this is the two boats that went on the 62 trip and the 64 trip, pretty historic trips in the Grand Canyon, were hulls built on the McKenzie River, and they were patterned after the features that I pointed out from the McKenzie style drift boats. So basically you had a lot of cataracts running the Colorado up until 1962 when Martin Litton and P.T. Riley contacted Keith Steele and said, hey, we want to give the Oregon boat form a shot on the Colorado River because we think that may be the style of boat that will unlock river running on the Colorado. And so Keith Steele was the most prominent boat builder on the McKenzie River at that time and said yes. And so Brad also found some cool correspondence during that era about those boats. And to me, that's just fascinating. And so what Keith built them was a boat that was slightly larger, slightly longer than the boats that we run on the McKenzie, but was basically the same principles that you saw in my boat running the Rogue River, okay? And so Martin had a different idea how to finish his, and P.T. Riley had a different idea how to finish his. They both took them to their separate shops, and they went to work. And so if you see my boat, the Portola out there, that's Martin and his son, and I think that's Don, is finishing out the hatches in the Portola in that picture. If you saw the Susie II, it's a different configuration inside. Both kind of work, but what I love is that Oregon connection. I think that's why Dave tapped me on the shoulders to say, there's an Oregon connection here. What do you think? And maybe he was just shaming me into saying yes, but that's why I was involved in building the Portola. And Martin Litton was a writer for Sunset Magazine. And when these guys did this, when they built these boats and introduced them in 62, there's some correspondence where they called them monsters because they felt and looked so much larger than the little cataracts out here that they were used to rowing. They weren't even sure they would float. And so instead of the hatches being empty, they put foam in the fore hatch and the aft hatch just as extra flotation to make sure they wouldn't sink on the Colorado. I found that interesting. I found all kinds of interesting things. So a lot of times these two boats and that 1964 trip is referred to as the two boats that helped save the Grand Canyon because, as you know, I'm sure there were two dams proposed that were going to be built. Martin Litton and David Brower took a trip with a writer named Francois Ledet to write a book about the experience and to play up the beauty of the boats on the water, to play up and immerse people in the river running aspect of the Grand Canyon, because most people see it from the top, and from the top, looking down a mile, you don't really experience a river runner's perspective, or from the bottom of the canyon up. And so what Martin and David Brower and the Sierra Club wanted to do was, let's bring that to light. And so the book that they wrote was this one. And every member of Congress got a copy of that book before the vote. And it created, in an era before social media, it created an absolute frenzy. And there's a lot of pressure put on Congress, not just because of that trip and this book, but it sure helped the public relations effort. And Congress did not appropriate the funds to build those two dams. And that's why those boats have a special piece of history involved with them. What I learned from that and what inspired me so much is when I read that book, cover to cover, what impressed me was these guys were connecting people to the bottom of the river. It was that whole connection thing that I think people were, that it was too distant, it was too far removed. And the book just really brings you along for the ride. And if you find one of these, it's a gem at a garage sale or somewhere, grab it, because it's an important piece of history of the Grand Canyon. And it actually just, it inspired me in so many ways that I can't even tell you. But the inspiration from that is what I have kind of taken to heart. And so what I do now, I have a crazy business model, but I'm using what those guys did with the Portola and connecting people to the Grand Canyon. I'm using that in a different way. So there are 230 wild and scenic rivers, designated wild and scenic in this country. I've run about 125 of them. And when I run the rivers, I run it in a wooden boat because it catches your attention. I've got some pictures like these. I love taking the pictures that will draw you in, but I love to write about the experience, take people along for the ride, much like these guys did on their Grand Canyon trip. And my plug is always keep the wild and scenic places wild and scenic, because there's always somebody that wants to build a dam, a tram, a mine. I mean, am I right? I mean, you can look at the Grand Canyon. Every year you think you win the battle, and then something, next year there's something else, some crazy whatever. And so if it can happen to the Grand Canyon, what about the other 229 wild and scenic rivers, like the Middle Fork of the Salmon, like the McKenzie? They're vulnerable. And one of my favorite lines that I use almost every time is the wooden boats that we row are as fragile as the rivers that we run. And that's part of the symmetry for me in running a wood boat, because that wood boat in these settings will catch your attention. Not that it necessarily, you may only read one paragraph that I write, but I want you to read the whole thing so I can make those points. And again, that's a blueprint that I learned from what those guys did in the Grand Canyon. That was my inspiration. And so if you see my writing for Wooden Boat Magazine or Small Boat or Gray's Sporting Journal, I've written lots of stuff. And Dave pointed out that I am a shameless plugger of my sponsors. So these guys are all along for the ride. They kind of like the fact that I do retro stuff. And so they send me, Patagonia as a sponsor. Everything I'm wearing, I think I was sent the stuff, which is great, because they don't want blatant plugs. They just want they want their brand to go along for the ride. And when we went down the Grand Canyon, we we had a wine sponsor, we had a beer sponsor, we had whiskey sponsor, we had Pendleton blankets, for God's sakes, we had Patagonia vests. I mean, there are benefits. What? Oh, we had lollipops. I'm not above plugging anything if it fits with what I'm doing. So I always point out my sponsors because they're great. I mean, they send me places, and Pendleton wool is fantastic. So you see a lot of the blankets and stuff. You don't see those blankets down there because it's kind of a pain to pack all that stuff sometimes, but it's so worth it when you get some shots like this with brands like those. It's a lot of fun. I do a lot of blogging for them, writing short articles for them, and really it's kind of, for me, it's another form of fishing. It's how many free blankets can I get, which my wife appreciates, and so there's something for everybody in this. And I did a trip on the Middle Fork and wrote a pretty fine article, I think, A River for the Running. That's probably some of my best work, because that's when I really explored the whole point of fragile boats, fragile places, and keep them wild. Because at that time, there was, when I wrote this about a year and a half ago, there was a proposal for redrawing the boundary line so that you could mine. On the Middle Fork of the Salmon, that is a sacred place to river runners in the Northwest. It is one of the coolest rivers you'll ever experience, and I highly encourage you to do that if you have a chance. But anyway, that's an example of some of the stuff that I do, and I'm just plugging the wild and scenic places and trying to keep them wild, and that's kind of my business model. Which leads me to this crazy adventure that I'm on right now. So I started in Missouri with the Portola, went out to the Rogue, ran the Rogue for 4 days, and if you remember back on that video, two things I've been thinking about for weeks. One was getting my Portola down the fish ladder, because that's tricky. Two was getting my boat through Mule Creek Canyon. That's a bigger boat than I'm used to rowing, and that's an 1854, 18-foot panels, and there are sections, one of them in particular called the Narrows in Mule Creek, where you're going maximum speed. It's kind of like a toboggan, when you see in the Olympics. You're flying, and you are touching both sides of that canyon with the tips of your oars. And And when you hit the narrows, that's an 18-foot boat trying to get through about a 20-foot opening. And if you get a little bit cockeyed, it's not going to end well. So anyway, those are the two things that really worried me going into that. And Mule Creek Canyon got me. So if you see the side of my boat, I'm going to have some repair work to do. Don't care, but I brought the real deal so you can see that there are consequences. But the good thing is the boat was floating. We got through Mule Creek, and I got slammed up against the wall pretty hard and hurt the boat, and I get to spend the winter fixing it. So, but it performed extremely well, which is what I was really hoping for, because it's a bigger boat than normal for that highly technical water, and there's some wonderful boat navigating that you get to do on that particular stretch. That's a wild and scenic stretch. It's a 4-day trip. So here are some fresh pictures that I took just of my boat in that setting. And again, it's kind of hard to mess up. I did not hit that rock, by the way. That's black bar for those of you who know it. I missed it by probably an inch, too. But it looks like I'm wincing in agony there. Blossom Bar really didn't concern me much because that boat is perfectly suited for that rapid. And what I mean by that, and it's even better on the Colorado in the Grand Canyon, because it's that high bow and it's so beefy up front. It's broad-shouldered, and I use that as almost a battering ram to break through a lateral to get to a sneaker line, basically. I'm one of those go big or go home kind of guys. I'm looking for the safest way to get my boat through, which means for me busting a lateral right after the drop. And that's what you got to do on that very first move where the blue arrows are. It's breaking through that lateral and getting to safe water where it eddies out a little bit. I knew I would be fine, and that boat just performed extremely well, except for Mule Creek, and that was operator error. This is Blossom Bar. So here, I'm going to bust through the lateral right about here. That was really close. I missed that rock by like an inch. I like to sleep on the boat. Again, the whole connection thing, but it's comfortable. I'll throw a little inflatable on there and cowboy bedroll, and I'm good to go. And so, basically that's it. And hopefully I answered the question of why we still run wood boats when there are so many other choices. But for me, there's no other choice. I just feel very comfortable in a wood boat. And if you get a chance, go check out the Portola and the damage that I did on the right side, because it's very real and very authentic. And again, I'm proud of that, because I slid that thing through despite being slammed up against the wall. And we're going to have a boat moving party right after this. So anybody that wants to attend a boat moving, lifting party, please join us out here. But thank you so much for having me.